Welcome back, family, to the South Florida Recruiting Report. Marcus Benjamin here, representing for On Three Rivals. Make sure you visit rivals.com for the latest recruiting news from yours truly and the staff over there at rivals.com. We're getting closer to signing day here. It's the pinnacle of recruiting in the calendar year. A lot of players will be signing during the early signing period. And to discuss those many players, I brought on John Garcia, my guy, who represents for Prospex Media now, and has some of the inside scoop on some of these guys now, as he always has. I mean, it's not like it's ever changed. Thanks for joining me today, John.
Always a pleasure, my guy.
Absolutely, man. It's a busy time of the year, man, and uh, we'll discuss a lot of the Florida prospects that are expected to sign. Some are on flip watch, but I would say probably most are probably not on flip watch compared to other years. But I want to start off with Miami here. Miami has a pretty solid class. Looks like they're on their way to another top 10 class. But once again, they do not get the top wide receiver out of South Florida. We saw Jeremiah Smith obviously commit to Ohio State. We saw Brandon Ennis also commit to Ohio State. And then now this year, the 2026 class, Calvin Russell is fully locked in with Syracuse. I don't see him wavering at all. John, is Miami cursed? They just can't get the top wide receiver in South Florida?
Look, I think Miami's doing just fine. But yeah, this is kind of one of the very few areas we can work towards relative to Miami getting better on the recruiting trail, right? So much has gone well for Miami in recruiting. But yeah, there's certain little elements that are still out there for Mario Cristobal and company to go out and grab. You know, in terms of keeping top South Florida talent home, that box is checked. But at the receiver position, that's really one of the only few spots where it does seem like there is still some room to improve. Look, there's still a lot of great local representation on the roster. Certainly, everyone knows Malachi Tony at this point, JoJo Trader, the list goes on. But yeah, I mean, I think Jeremiah Smith really emphasized that point, you know, for Miami right out of the gates earlier in the Cristobal era. And then this cycle, Calvin Russell, a double legacy, local, long-time priority. I think optically this was one that you just felt like Miami couldn't lose, but you got to give credit to Syracuse. You have to understand the NIL aspect of this thing and how fast all of this stuff seemingly changed at the 11th hour with Calvin back when he was committing. I remember you were there, right? We were texting all night that night. Hey, like there's a lot of Michigan buzz. Syracuse actually feels kind of good. You know, like Miami really wasn't in that firm top one or two for Calvin, even at that point when he was getting ready to make his decision. So clearly earlier than that, he had, you know, the internal thought of, hey, I'm going to leave home for college. I'm going to go do my own thing. And we know basketball was a big part of it as well. So you wonder how much basketball and NIL played a factor maybe together with Calvin Russell. So I think, you know, it's case by case with these kids. It's never one thing. It's never that simple. It's never as simple, certainly, as fans might think it could be. But no, I don't think Miami's cursed at the receiver position. They're doing just fine. You know, Josh Moore looks like he's going to be a star. We mentioned Malachi Tony. I mean, there's still some really strong local players, you know, at that position on the roster. But yeah, when you miss on a Jeremiah Smith, when you miss on a Calvin Russell, it is glaring and understandably creates a little bit of frustration.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I will say about that is that a lot of these players from down here in South Florida do want to get out of South Florida. I mean, South Florida is it's a great place to live as far as, you know, the hustle and bustle of the big city, the beaches, the weather, that sort of thing. But I think a lot of these kids do want to kind of get out of South Florida. I mean, some of these kids are not from the best neighborhoods and they might want to get away from that crowd so they can focus on football and their studies. So I'm not mad at them leaving South Florida at all. They just need to do what's best for them. And I think that is the case. That was the case with Brandon Ennis. I know when I spoke to him, it was more like, yeah, I just kind of want to get out of South Florida, that type of thing. I think with JJ, it was more so he wanted to be coached by Brian Hartline and really kind of continue, I guess, the legacy of the top wide receivers coming out of that school, that type of thing. And then with Calvin Russell, I feel like it's Fran Brown is just doing a great job really connecting with the kids and really being kind of a father figure for Russell, in addition to being away from home. So, but Miami, like you said, they're not doing too bad. They've got Vance Spafford committed to the class. They just got Paris Milan, who was a really top player, I would say, at the position in the country. But they were able to land a Samarin Wingo, who is tearing it up this season as a senior and continues to do so in the playoffs. Let's see what he does this week if he continues that run with St. Augustine. What are your thoughts on Samarian Wingo and Miami being able to land him in their 26 class?
Yeah, remember when he committed, I believe in the summer, this was not a lock for Miami. This was very much a back and forth with the Florida Gators, which I know now sounds, a little crazy, but remember, Florida finished the 25 cycle very hot in recruiting, particularly in state. They flipped a lot of guys. And look, St. Augustine to Gainesville, not that far of a drive, so you understand why the Gators were always sort of in it for Wingo, but Miami capitalized at the initial moment there in the summer. And what an evaluation, that was. I think when he committed, everyone thought this was a very good get. Big physical receiver, polished, great hands, great length, filled out already, kind of looks like a college player. But what he's shown as a senior is, look, there's a huge upside when it comes to the vertical ability of Wingo. I think that's the biggest difference. He racked up the production as a junior. There was another Power 5 receiver on his team, so maybe he split a little bit of the love because of that. But this year, as the guy, even with all of the defensive focus week in, week out, you see a lot of down the field shots, contested grabs, vertical threat has been kind of confirmed, with Samarian Wingo. And I think that's the biggest difference with his senior season. So great early eval by Miami, and it's paid off, every single week as Wingo has been, arguably the most dominant wide receiver in the state of Florida. And anytime you're even in that conversation, you're doing a lot of big things on Friday nights.
Absolutely. Miami able to get the 4-star Samarian Wingo, who moved up in the On3 rankings in the last week or so. So I believe he's the top wide receiver in the state at the moment. One of the top defensive backs that Miami's also interested in is Justice Fitzpatrick. I mean, this guy has been tremendous this year as well, playing both sides of the football. He started out his career at wide receiver, starting to do a little bit more of that here in his senior year, and is still, of course, a solid defender. Georgia has seemed to kind of put their paws on him and really kind of, solidified him for their 26 class. But Miami's still going to push here. He's one of many players that will kind of go through here to see. I just want to kind of get your opinion on if they'll flip Justice Fitzpatrick. You think he flips from Georgia?
Yeah, I think that one would be a huge deal. He's harder to read, let's be honest. I mean, of the kids we cover, Marcus, Justice is one who is a little bit more reserved, a little bit more calculated when he does speak. So that leaves, I think, a lot of room for movement, if and when, something does change. We know Miami has been in it as long as anybody. Obviously, the family moved down to South Florida when his older brother Minka was drafted by the Dolphins. Ironically, he's back with the Dolphins several years later. But yeah, the Fitzpatrick family was in South Florida the entire time. So early in that crystal ball tenure, this was a huge priority target in the 26 class. And again, when there is longevity and consistency both ways, Miami doesn't lose a lot of those battles. And Justice kind of quietly, he's been back on campus at the U. Like this isn't something that was shut down and said and done the moment he committed to Kirby Smart and company. So I do think that there is some room here for Miami to make a final push. I don't think NIL is going to be a huge factor here. Obviously, the family is pretty well set on the financial front as far as we know. But I do think, positionally, I think there's some questions there. The safety corner conversation and how the teams are presenting that to Justice, I do think will become a factor in the final analysis there. And obviously, look, it's comfortable, for the Fitzpatrick family in South Florida, and the idea of Justice in Coral Gables and Minka in Miami Gardens is not the worst scenario, for the family. They're a very close and tight-knit family. So, that is being sold heavily, by Cristobal and company. So I do think that there is some room here for Miami to pull a stunner. Miami always flips recruits this time of year. We've already seen several, go the way of the Hurricanes, but there's still room left for that one big splash. And certainly if they can pull Fitzpatrick, that would qualify.
Definitely, if they're able to land him, this would be an amazing DB class that they would haul in for 26. I think it's unlikely at this point. I do think he sticks with Georgia, but you never know with Cristobal and company what they have under their sleeve here. But let's switch over to the Florida Gators class, because this is a really intriguing situation here. Obviously, with Billy Napier being fired mid-season, but the class has stayed intact here, John, which is just really big surprise to me. I thought at least one or two would flip or decommit at this point, but they're all staying intact here. Florida continues to have a terrible season, not making a bowl game. And these Gator commits are still pledged to Florida. One of which is CJ Brona, who actually visited Ohio State recently. I think there's a big chance he flips to the Buckeyes. What say you?
Yeah, I think certainly the trend meter is headed in that direction right now, especially as Florida is playing the waiting game. Relative to Lane Kiffin or whoever it's going to be. We're not going to get an answer till at the very earliest this weekend. And remember, these kids are supposed to make their decision by Wednesday of next week. So I think the timing is going to hurt some of those guys relative to Florida, LSU, maybe Ole Miss, some of these schools, Auburn, where there is still very much a question mark. The timing is really tough when it's, that first Wednesday in December. But for Brona, like you said, I think the biggest thing was, could the Buckeyes get him on campus? Could they actually get him up for an official to spend a weekend up there? Because, they weren't really involved earlier in the cycle for CJ when he was deciding between, Florida and some of these other programs. So I do think them getting up and getting that full Buckeye experience is going to be hard to turn down, especially given the timing and especially, given the prestige of Ohio State. A lot of people look at it and say, hey, they're not playing young guys. They're number one team in the country. They're defending champs. But look, they're not playing young guys. I watched the Ohio State game the other day. Devin Sanchez was out there as a true freshman, at corner. So there's an ability to play if you've got the goods at Ohio State, regardless of what that depth chart looks like. And I think that's just an easy sell right now for that program. Again, here, I don't think it's a big NIL play. I know it's a factor. I definitely don't think it's the top factor for CJ and his family. So I do think today Ohio State would be the most likely destination. But there is also, Marcus, there's a reason these Florida commits haven't bailed, because the overwhelming thought was, well, first of all, NIL is very good in Gainesville. So, deals are agreed upon. And to my knowledge, they've been followed up with, even though the head coach is not going to be there. So all of those factors remain the same as of this recording. with most of these verbal commits. And the other side of it is the feeling is, look, it's not going to be a bad hire. It's going to be a big name, a well-known name. So I know a lot of the conversations between Gator commitments themselves has been like, hey, like, let's wait this thing out and kind of see what happens. Same thing with the portal, right? You're not seeing a lot of reports that a bunch of Gators are expected to leave the program at this time. So I think everyone is in wait and see mode. But for the 26 recruits, they've got the shortest window to make that decision because signing day is as we record this, 8 days away.
Absolutely. I do want to kind of pivot to that, as in the calendar, and I've got John Garcia, who represents for Prospex Media. I do want to give you an opportunity to kind of tell me a little bit more about Prospex Media, what you kind of do for them. And then, if you could kind of give me your opinion on the way this kind of calendar is working here, because to be honest with you, this whole Lane Kiffin situation is a bit odd. It's this is a team that is contending for a national championship at this point, right? They beat Mississippi State. They're pretty much a lock for the college football playoff with one loss in the SEC. And their coach is out here shopping around, which is, I don't know, disrespectful, I think, to the players, to the program, to the alumni of that school. And then at the same time, you've got signing day coming up here. So you want to land the best class possible. If you decide to leave the program, that could potentially be catastrophic for your class going into signing day next week. And then you've got, of course, the transfer portal window that opens up in early January while playoffs are still going on for several teams. I don't know, man. Like, especially with you, that in your industry, and like I said, I want you to kind of explain kind of what you do. What needs to be changed here? Because there's obviously something that's not right with how the calendar is right now.
Right. I mean, even when I was a kid, I was always kind of obsessed with the draft, right? NFL draft, NBA
Me
draft,
too.
whatever it was. And I always wondered why in basketball they'd play the finals and then, man, that draft is very soon after. And I always thought that's so hard for like a scouting department to try to, play both sides of the coin while some of these teams are in the finals, in the playoffs, whatever. But, you're drafting one or two guys. So I guess it's not a huge deal. Well, now, I mean, that seems like not a big deal at all because in college, you're doing everything at once. Everything. Like you just mentioned with Lane Kiffin. He's got a recruiting class at Ole Miss. He's got a roster at Ole Miss that is, let's be honest, almost a lock to make the playoff, barring a huge upset on Friday. Yet he's shopping, and he's a top candidate at two premier schools in the same conference. As Ole Miss, with signing day 8 days away. I mean, it's like all of this is happening at the same time. So yeah, the calendar, I think with the coaching carousel is always kind of a mess, and you can't really change it too much, but you can change, when these players can sign, when these players can enroll, the portal windows. Those are the elements that we've got control over, right? As a sport. So that's where you got to create some movement, because in no other sport, at no other level, and let's be honest, this is borderline professional level at this point, nobody else has to deal with all of this at the exact same time. There's a huge free agency window in the offseason. Coaches got at the end of the regular season, and then they make changes after the playoffs in every other sport. But in college football, we're like, hey, do everything between, Thanksgiving and Valentine's Day, everything. So it's just too much. And I don't know, I guess, how we got to this point, how it so quickly became all encompassing. But yeah, whether it's a July signing period for, guys going into their senior year, whether it's moving the portal window closer to the spring, I'm not sure the full answer, but I am sure that something's got to change because nowhere else is everybody dealing with a roster, chaotic situation all at the same time while we, play the playoffs. Oh, and it's the holidays too. No big deal, right? So I mean,
Right.
it's just
And the high school playoffs as well.
yeah, they're still playing too, right? So it's just it's a little ridiculous. Especially, this is a top sport in this country by far. And it should be treated as such. And I think, yeah, everyone recognizes these issues. So let's figure out a way to make it that much smoother. And especially, look, for Kiffin and the adults and the millionaires, look, yeah, let them handle more pressure. That's okay. But for the 17-year-old that has a game on Friday and then 4 days later or 5 days later supposed to sign with a school that he doesn't know if his head coach will be there, that's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah.
So let's take care of that group first for sure. And then let the rest, start to sort itself out. But yeah, it's a mess, man. There's really no other way to put it.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's definitely tough on the kids, the families. It's one of the biggest decisions that they'll make, and they're just like 17. It's a tough decision, but college football has to fix something here because this whole Kiffin situation just feels icky. You know what I mean? Just kind of want to run through a couple of more players that we think will flip or not. And first, Caden Hall. This is a player also committed to the Gators from Milton, Florida. Outstanding four-star safety. Visited North Carolina. Visited Ole Miss. And I think definitely there's a possibility here that I'm sorry, visited Georgia Tech and visited Ole Miss. Yeah, so there's definitely a possibility that he could flip. As of right now, what do you think? You think he flips? From
Yeah, I think he's probably more likely to make a move. This is one that Florida was not a runaway pick back in the summer months, and everyone has stayed in contact with Caden. This is an elite safety, as you mentioned, big physical player as well. You see what Georgia Tech is doing; they're preaching stability there relative to every other school, on his list. And
right,
sometimes that stuff makes the difference. Let's go to a not chaotic situation because the whole Florida, if you got Florida and Ole Miss, on you at this time, and Caden's not alone in that group, that's a rough draw, for a recruit because you just don't know. A lot of Ole Miss commits don't know. A lot of Ole Miss commits are starting to say, hey, like, do I need a backup plan? Do I need to call some of these schools that were in it for me before because they don't know what Kiffin's going to do? So if you've got them and Florida in it, like Caden Hall does, that's a lot of I don't know. So
yeah,
I do think that the stability of Georgia Tech, Brent Key's an alum, they're having their best year and I don't know how long this year. But there's also like opportunity for him to play early. I think all of those elements bode well for the Yellow Jackets, and he was just there, like you mentioned. So I think those late visits they still do matter because we're still dealing with teenagers making these huge decisions. So I think that atmosphere in Atlanta, night game, even though they lost, I think is going to pull a lot of weight with Caden in the final analysis, unless we get an answer from Florida or Ole Miss, sooner than we think.
that's the key there. Are we going to get an answer sooner than we think? And I think that's the case for CJ Hester as well. Like if the Deron Wilson, the defensive backs coach at Florida, stays with the Gators, then I could see Hester and Hall and possibly even Brona staying with the Gators. All three are defensive back committed to Florida. Um, so maybe Hester stays, maybe goes. What do you think about Hester? Do you think he stays with the Gators or he flips to Iowa because Iowa seems like they are the leader to flip?
Yeah, look, Iowa was number two for him pretty much the whole way through, and kind of a surprise to some. Miami was in it, Syracuse, a couple other schools were in the mix, but Iowa really impressed CJ and his camp. But look, yeah, this kid's a Gator. I mean, he's been one forever. I think this one would be a little bit more stark. This one would be a little bit more about the new staff than the current staff. So I think he sticks, but there's no doubt Iowa is the school if he does elect to make a move.
For sure. Let's switch over to the Florida State Seminoles here, the last of the big three here in Florida. And they got some guys that possibly could flip that are kind of entertaining other schools, and they are also entertaining a commit from the ACC as well. Let's start with Cameron Wilson, committed to Syracuse, took a recent visit to Florida State. This is his second visit to Florida State this season. He's always talked highly of the Noles, from what I know of him. Do you think he kind of pulls the late flip here?
Look, FSU has kind of maybe surprisingly finished a lot of flips of late on the recruiting trail. So I think Cam would be maybe the biggest one of that group if they can pull it off. But look, yeah, you talk to him and it's like, FSU is right there, and they always have been, right? But there's also this, I don't know if it's confidence from the Syracuse side of it. They got in on him early, got him committed early. We've seen these two schools battle for a lot of recruits. Calvin Russell, Pop Hughes obviously flipped from FSU to SU.
Yeah.
But so there's this confidence in Syracuse that he's not going anywhere. But look, it's an in-state deal, and this is a premium position, for Florida State. If things are going to change and change in a hurry, the pass rusher group is one that has to get better and has to get better quickly, and that's something that can be sold differently at Florida State relative to other schools. So the recent visit, I think, is a big deal. There was talk of Cam shutting it down, kind of happened and then didn't happen. So I think him keeping that door open creates optimism in Tallahassee at the end of the day.
For sure. At this point, that one is just 50-50 for me. It's really, truly a coin flip. I mean, Fran Brown obviously doing a great job in recruiting South Florida. I don't expect that to stop anytime soon. I feel like the momentum is going to continue with Syracuse recruiting top guys from South Florida, but it seems like Wilson could probably want to stay closer to home. He obviously likes the staff over there at Florida State. So I think that one could definitely be 50-50 at the end of the day. It certainly will be a signing we'll be watching come next week. Last one for Florida State, Karan Maycock. He's been committed to Florida State for a while. He stated that his recruitment was shut down before the season started. So that makes this one even more interesting, right? And then he takes an official visit, not just a visit, but an OV to Texas. Now, Texas has already done a tremendous job of recruiting South Florida. They've got Dia Bell, Derek Cooper, and James Johnson, all top 50 guys when it comes to recruits down here in Florida. What are the chances you think Texas flips Maycott from Florida State?
Yeah, I think these are strong chances as time goes on here. Look, Maycock has always kept the door open to a degree, and Texas has planned, not only with him, with Isaiah Williams, other guys, they've always planned to push late for a linebacker. Excuse me. So I think this one's wide open. The visit is huge. So yeah, I think he's a Longhorn.
You think he's a Longhorn? Okay, yeah, I think so too. Like if I had to put some money on it right now, I probably would put it on Texas just because they've been doing so well with South Florida recruits. And when we see late visits like this, it always raises guys like us eyebrows because, hey, Late visits only happen for a reason. That means the team is really interested, and the players also really interested here. So that's definitely another signing that we'll definitely watch here. John Garcia is joining me from Prospex Media. Tell the people just a little bit more about kind of what you do for that company.
Yeah, we're still figuring it all out. We do podcasts, we consult, we are scouting. So it's a bit of everything. So it's exciting, it's a challenge, and you're gonna hear a lot more about it in the spring. So we're excited for sure.
Awesome, good stuff. Thanks for joining me today once again. Next week should be fun. Hopefully, I'll get through it and I'll
Mhm.
survive another
Good luck.
signing day. We'll see. Thanks, appreciate that. Always a pleasure to have you on, my guy, and hopefully, we'll see each other again soon.
Thank you.
All right, that is going to wrap it up for the South Florida Recruiting Report. Make sure you visit rivals.com for more articles from myself regarding recruiting leading up until signing day. Until the next episode.